So I want to thank, just briefly, Professor Andrew Cotto of the Arts and Sciences Department for helping to organize this. I want to thank Clarissa Hernandez, Editor-in-Chief of Lexington Line Magazine, for her help. I want to thank the Lexington Line Faculty Advisor, Professor John Deming, for his assistance. And of course, I want to thank Anne so much for being here. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is it Marie Claire, Marie Claire, Marie Claire, Mary Claire?
So whenever anyone asks me that, I just say, as long as you're talking about it, I don't care how you pronounce it.
Okay, I can like,
So-
like Marie Claire.
And I don't even know if I can do it on demand. I just, when you hear it's like Mary Claire. It's a combination of Marie and Mary, sort of like the French version.
I like the French version.
Okay.
Marie.
Marie Claire.
Right? I'm going to keep saying that until I run out of saliva. So Anne was named Editor-in-Chief of the U.S. edition of Marie Claire. I won't do it every time, I promise. Marie Claire in September 2012. And in case if you don't know the magazine business, Editor-in-Chief is top dog, boss. Doesn't get any higher. I mean, it's God. Right? She's the Editor-in-Chief of Marie Claire in 2012. She oversees all content for the brand's print magazine, website, tablet editions, and brand extensions, including Marie Claire at Work and the brand's partnership with Lifetime Television's Project Runway series. Before taking the Editor-in-Chief role of Marie Claire, Anne was the Editor-in-Chief of Brides since October 2011. Love Brides.
You are a target demo.
Prior to that, she was at Marie Claire for 2 years as the executive editor. So she left for a year, came back for the top spot. That worked out well.
Yeah.
It did good.
Yeah, I advise quitting. It's
Early
worked out
often.
for me twice, yeah.
You got to move up. Prior to the stint at Marie Claire, she worked at Vanity Fair for 10 years. Very important job, very well-known magazine. I have a question about that later for you, by the way, don't forget. Prior to that, she worked for George Plimpton at the Paris Review. I was trying to think of a contemporary comparison to George Plimpton, and I just couldn't. I was like, Drake. I just couldn't think of someone that's as significant today as George Plimpton was and still is in memoriam.
Well, let me get back to you on that, but that's a good question.
Right. It was the Paris Review, which is still a publication. It's one of the most literary magazines ever. Like, so literary.
It's a lot more literary than Mary Claire.
It's a lot more literary than Mary Claire. And she helped George Plimpton with his book on Truman Capote. You know Truman Capote? We're big fans of his work.
Oh, good. Not every audience knows who he is, to be sad. But as soon as I say breakfast at
We
Tiffany's.
have great professors here. In 2015, Anne won the Editor of the Year award. It's called the Eddie Award. That's cute. Where do you keep your Eddie?
In my office.
In your office?
Yeah. I had to buy it, by the way.
You had to pay for it?
Yeah. It's a big scam.
I want one. How much was it?
I mean, I think I can get you a deal.
All right, good. I'll wait for a garage sale. My mic went off. Hello. Okay. Prior to the Eddie, she won the Editor of the Year from Media Industries Newsletter. She also serves on the boards of several prominent organizations, including Ann Power, Vital Voices Advisory Council. Here's my baby. The ITVS, Women and Girls Lead Leadership Council. All In Together, Women Leading Change, and the UN Foundation's Girl Up Advisory Board. Busy.
Yeah. You can stop anytime.
I'm almost done. And graduated magna cum laude with a BA in English and American Literature from Harvard University in 1995. Yeah. I thought it was Harvard where we met. It wasn't Harvard. It was PS 58.
We've met many times in our lives, Andrew, and past lives as
It couldn't
well.
have been Harvard. Good. That's the bio. Now it comes to the Q part of the Q&A. I'll be asking some of the questions. Clarissa will be asking the other questions.
Okay,
You have to answer all of them.
I'll scooch back so I can, okay. I don't get a pass?
Nope, that device we hooked up to you is actually a truth detector, not a microphone, so it will go off if we're not
sorry.
getting the whole story. Okay. We got the Marie Claire thing cleared up. So your experience, your background is primarily with written media, right? Word-based. At what point in your life did you discover the love for the written word?
Really in high school. I had a really good teacher, actually, a really good English teacher who was also the advisor to the school newspaper. And he suggested that I try out for the magazine, for the newspaper, and try to write a couple of stories my sophomore year. And he was amazing. He was funny, he was great. He was, he brought us, this was a long time ago, he brought us ring dings every meeting. And it was a highlight of my high school career. And that's really where I started got the journalism bug.
Were you an active reader part of that? There was just I'm a voracious reader growing up.
I loved reading, and I have books that have really had a huge impact on me. But I was not that kid who was like over in the corner, reading. They didn't exist then, but like all the Harry Potter books or something.
Right.
I wasn't like a bookworm. But I liked reading.
Good.
I liked information and sort of reading the news.
Oh, interesting. And you majored in English and American literature at Harvard. At that point, when you were still an undergrad, what did you plan on doing with your degree?
I wanted to be Joan Didion. I don't know who that is. There's a really good documentary out about her, and she was actually shot for a Celine ad a year or two ago, which you might recognize her from. She's an amazing nonfiction writer from California who I read her in college, and she blew my mind, and I was like, okay, I want to do that. And I didn't end up doing that, but it got me to New York.
So you came to New York looking to be the next Joan Didion. Mm-hmm. And you write creative nonfiction was sort of the area that you were most versed in. So what happened?
Like most of us in New York City, I had to support myself, and I got a paid internship after like a couple of months of living on my grandmother's couch, and that was just every job sort of kept getting more and more interesting. The internship, I got the internship in like March, and I graduated in January, which was actually a semester late. It's another story.
They left it out of the bio.
Yeah, I have quite a few little absences. The 10 years of Vanity Fair, there was a year in California. What happened? I just kept getting jobs. The work just kept getting interesting. I liked going to work. I liked being in a collaborative project. It turned out I didn't really want to go sit in a closet by myself all day and write, which I tried, which is really hard, Andrew. I don't know how you do it.
Well, look what happened. The results are right here.
I just turned out to be like someone who, so the thing is, my internship, there are only 4 people that worked at the Paris Review. So 4th of July, for some reason, 3 of them quit. One of them, right before 4th of July. So one of them went off to have a baby, one of them went off to finish her novel, and the other one got a job at Time Out. I think she's still the dance editor at Time Out. This was like a long time ago, yeah. And so all of a sudden they needed like quickly to hire people, and it being not a very commercial nor well-paying place, they offered me the job of being assistant to George Plimpton. So, that was when I was going to get in my car and drive out to California and become write my on-the-road novel or whatever. But that job was really interesting. It paid just enough to pay my rent. I lived way uptown on 108th and Broadway, which was not as nice as it is now. Had really cheap rent. And, then I dove into New York, and they had great literary parties there. Like I would do things like order the booze for the parties and chop the carrots for the parties and move the furniture, because it was very sort of collegiate. Our magazine, and I say that loosely, it was like 4 people at a desk, and we all shared one computer and one email address on the ground floor of this townhouse in 72nd on the East River, and upstairs was the place, his house, where he had parties, and it was just such a fun scene. It was a scene.
So there was like a active literary scene in New York with lots of socializing, etc. Does that still exist? If so, no one.
I don't know. No, no, it does. It does. I mean, certainly people still have book parties and literary parties, and that was the real draw of even Vanity Fair too. It was like a really fun place to work, where fascinating people were wandering through all the time, and I just kept thinking that I couldn't leave. It was going to be so much fun. And then fast forward, after 10 years of Vanity Fair, I got this job offer from Mary Claire and to be executive editor, and it was a really big jump up in job. But most people never left Vanity Fair. More on that later. But so I was like, wow, this is a great interview. I loved the Hearst building. I loved Mary Claire. I loved a whole floor of mostly women. It was really cool to be thinking about like women's rights and all that stuff. And the funny thing is, so I went back that night to a Vanity Fair book party, and it was totally like a literary scene. It was down at the Waverly Inn.
People spoken like this.
It was like super kind of heady in a certain way. Like it was, Vanity Fair and the New Yorker and all that. And I was like, God, if I take that job at Mary Claire, I'll never be able to come to parties like this again. And then I was like, well, I've been going to parties like this for like 10 years. I think I've maybe been to enough. And went on to explore other worlds in New York, like fashion, which I had never done before.
So did it feel kind of in your Harvard graduate and literary mind that it was a step down in a way?
No, I think that Harvard was filled with extremely ambitious people who were, at the best, like wanting to change the world, and maybe at the worst, extremely opportunistic. So I think my Harvard colleagues, most of them, some of them, there were plenty who went into academia, and that wasn't for me. I wanted to get out in the real world. So, I think honestly, like the status of a step up was probably outweighed the the headiness of like, I was still chopping carrots. No, I would not at Vanity Fair. I chopped carrots at Paris Review until the very end.
Okay, good. So this whole process, one of the things that I tend to find often in today's kids, right, is they don't, the process of going from A to wherever that next step is quite long. So,
Yeah.
We're talking about an ascent of what, a dozen years, 15 years?
From like I got to New York in '95 and becoming what, executive editor. When would you say I've gotten there?
How about
Still waiting.
How about gainfully employed?
Oh, gainfully employed, like actually supporting myself in time. I mean, I don't know. The whole thing took a long time. I've been in New York 25 years, and I always say like I'm still sort of just taking the next interesting job and figuring out what I want to do with my life. And
you're gonna get there, Anne. I have faith. I have such faith in you.
But I remember asking a friend of mine who's like older, and he was like, someone set us up as like, oh, he works in magazines, you should talk to him, and he was like 7 years older than me. Yeah. And he was writing, he was like freelancing for Elle and writing for, I don't know, all sorts of magazines, and I was like, how do you get to do that? Thinking he was gonna say like, well, you have to work really hard and do this, that, and give me like a roadmap. And he was like, I don't know, I just feel like if you wait a few years, all your friends will be editors. And they'll assign you stuff. I mean, it's not a linear process whatsoever.
Okay, good. About the business itself, Marie Claire, it's a fashion magazine, right? How do you think that it's evolved, over its 20 plus years as a fashion magazine?
Well, I like to think it's gotten a lot better in the last 5 years. No, so Marie Claire actually, the French magazine was founded in 1937 by a divorced mom of 2 kids who was extremely ahead of her time, and she like did yoga and wrote books, and for 1937 France that was a big deal. And she founded this magazine actually as a beauty magazine that was always going to focus on the realities of women's life. But be that, how to get your lipstick on, or how to, there's actually written into the charter of Marie Claire that that we have to cover abortion rights. So it's always had a women's rights slant. And it was a beauty magazine. And it came out weekly, and the first one sold out, and it was a hit immediately. And then they shut it down during World War II, and then in the 80s they started launching them around the world. But so it actually started as a beauty magazine, which we don't always admit. And then over the years it's become more and more fashion-y. And then I think it's almost 25 years old. I think it's 23 years old in the US. So I'd say the fashion has evolved. I think the other thing about fashion is that it's become more of a national conversation. Fashion has diversified as well. It's on TV, it's in Target, it's a huge sort of populist interest now. Whereas when Marie Claire started out, it was much more like behind closed doors in Paris only.
Right.
So we've sort of followed the culture in that way.
And it's sort of lots of avenues spring out of the fashion hub of it, right? And do you think that Marie Claire does a particularly good job, I think, of balancing different aspects of culture.
Right.
And how much do you sort of have a plan of going into like we're going to cover X amount based on I'm not going to say important stuff that
right.
face risk isn't important, right? But do you have an intentional balance that you go do you strike to achieve?
Well, I think the thing about, to me, Marie Claire just strikes that all my friends care about mascara, and they also care about the future of women's rights. Everyone's talking about sexual harassment right now. I mean, so I think to me it reflects the balance of most women I know, which is that you can care about what is the best conditioner for your hair, and also really, really care about what's going on. We have this amazing story coming up about this whole region in China that is completely matriarchal. Like there's a woman chief, it's completely, and it's just always been that way. And I was going through the galleys earlier, and I was like, wow. That's still a story that blows me away, and that's it's sort of the criteria for getting into Marie Claire. But so yeah, we certainly have all of the fashion magazines. We've always had the most socially conscious reader and the socially conscious bent, and I think it can be helpful also because, frankly, it's a really competitive field, and our social justice slant differentiates us. We're the magazine that does that, and we're also the magazine that shoots the latest Gucci dress. But there are, 7, there used to be 11 magazines who do that now. So it's nice to have that differentiator.
I imagine that must feel empowering for you as the editor-in-chief to cover all those angles.
I love it.
Yeah.
I really do love my job.
So do I. We're the only 2 people in the world who say that out loud. Oh, cool. Well, thank you. I'm going to pass over to Clarissa for some questions.
Yeah. On that note, actually, do you feel that as the editor-in-chief that you're kind of responsible for talking about these hot topics? Like, sexual harassment and like what's going on in the political climate. So my question for you actually is, can you talk a little bit about how the current political climate has affected the content in the magazine, or like how your staff works?
So we had, after the last election, presidential election, we had scheduled, probably not the best advised, but we had this huge Power Woman luncheon scheduled for the day after Election Day. Yeah, 200 women at the top of the Hearst Tower, and I was like leading this conversation with Jessica Williams from The Daily Show, and it was going to be this fabulous day of celebrating women's empowerment, and we sort of, we booked it 3 or 4 months in advance with this idea that like, it's going to be a great day. And I woke up that I didn't stay up late enough to I just was like, this is weird, and then I'm going to bed. And I woke up the next morning to 2 texts. One was from our friends at Marie Claire France, being like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I was like, what are they talking about? And then the next one was from my publisher, who's like my business partner in crime. I do the content, she does the money. And she just wrote me like, what the are we gonna do about that lunch?
Just play it cool. Just show everyone. Nothing ever happened. How's
Neither
everybody
of
doing?
them mentioned like what exactly, but that's how I figured out. I was like, oh my God. And then I checked the news, like that's how I found out. So I will not tell you, I mean, we generally are not a partisan magazine. We do have that socially conscious reader, but we did not endorse a candidate the way that some of our competitors had. So, but I would say that the majority of the floor was in tears that day. And I had to get up and I was like, what? So the lunch went on, we couldn't cancel it. A few people canceled on us, which was totally understandable. A number of people, we had actually planned this in advance. We had a couple of TV journalists who had been up all night covering the news, female TV journalists. And it ended up being a really sort of wonderful commiseration. Anyway, so my long answer is that we do engage in the political world. I will say that since the Trump election, we have done so many stories. The first one was called, I love this, it's called The Force Awakens. And it was about all these women who previously did not want to run for office, hadn't thought about it, hadn't crossed their mind. And it's amazing to see like the salon owner who wants to run for city council, and we really have tapped into that. So we did that in March. Now we have a story about how to run for office, like really what's the roadmap for how you actually, if you're a complete novice, run for office. And then we saw, I think, I don't think that Marie Claire was responsible for it, but I think this huge sort of wake up moment. There was an article in the Times about it this past weekend. But we saw in this past, off presidential cycle election that more women won than ever. I mean, it's huge. So.
And women of color.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, in the current issue you all are holding right now, there's an article called 50 Times Women Slayed in 2017. And I read through the entire thing, and I think it's amazing to also talk about the struggles that women in the workforce go through, but also I applaud Marie Claire for talking about all the things that were powerful and positive in this year.
Well, that's something we actually really, thank you so much, and I'm glad you liked that article. We did it last year for the first time, and it was so much fun. Obviously, we thought it was going to end with this big, really amazing time women, won the White House. But it was so much fun, and everyone was like, God, it's been such a bad year for women. I was like, no, there's been so many great things that happened.
Even other ones, like the woman the developer at the Apple conference, she didn't see anything. She's a Japanese woman. She didn't see anything for elderly women, like any apps. So she went out, learned how to code, and made her own app, and that's in the article. And I was like, that's brilliant. Yeah. So things like that are so inspiring.
Well, I think it's really, there's so much talk. I often get asked, and I'm happy to answer because I didn't have a roadmap either. My mom stayed at home, and I didn't really know how I was going to do this whole working mom thing. So I'm happy to answer the question, how do you balance it all? But I think also there's way too much emphasis in the culture on it's so hard to be a working mom, so hard to be a woman in the workforce, and it's actually awesome. And I think the more we just sort of illustrate and just show the good parts of it, it's yes, we need to talk about the difficult issues, but we also really need to celebrate the great things about it. And that is actually, I think, more powerful in some ways, because it's just that, if you can't see it, you can't be it, that famous Gloria Steinem quote. So thank you for noticing that.
Of course. And you often cite a dedication to remaining curious about the world. So with our audience in mind, can you elaborate more on that?
I think, when I was at Vanity Fair, I was there for 10 years, and I just noticed that my boss, Graydon Carter, who was a great boss, and he just, I was on the younger side of the staff then, and he'd gather all the young people once, I won't say once a month, maybe it was 4 times a year. And he just gathered us, and he's like, hey, what's going on? What's the cool pair of jeans? What are you listening to? Now he'd be like, what did you just binge watch? And just sort of curiosity about the culture, and that really drove his passion for the magazine and what he covered, and he put a lot of that stuff in the magazine. So I was really, and even George Plimpton used to just be like still, like you guys don't know, but he had this like really strong Long Island lockjaw, and he looked incredibly proper, and he looked like he was straight out of like central casting of like, in fact he was often cast in movies as like that dude, and
pompous old white guy.
Yeah, totally. Like he was like the standard issue old white guy with like pompous accent. But he was like, until the end, he was like, we should do a story about. He loved like writing stories for the Times, and he would write for anybody who asked. And so I just honestly saw that in my role models, and I think that the worst thing you could possibly do is it happens, people get bored, but to stay bored, there's no excuse. Like you got to just go find something interesting. Even the worst jobs I ever had, I found a way in some way, not being a cocktail waitress in college, that was awful, but to make it interesting for myself at least. And so that has to drive you. If you get bored, you might, I sort of feel like if you're bored, you're dead.
Do you do that now as editor-in-chief? Do you like bring all the young kids in and say like, hey, what's cool, what's new, what's happening?
Megan, Megan, my assistant, has been with me less than a year. She's been great, and she writes for the magazine, writes for the website. I mean, everyone on our staff is pretty much, I want to say almost everyone except for me is at least under 40, if not 35. So we have a really young staff. At Vanity Fair, there were a lot of people who have been there for like many, many, many years. So you had to work a little harder to find the young people on the staff. But I hope so. I mean, if I'm going to go back today and make a renewed effort to ask them their ideas.
Yeah. And what types of careers, now that we're talking about kind of the young people and staff and like how Marie Claire is different from Vanity Fair, what careers are there for graduates in media, and what positions do you look to fill with these recent graduates?
Okay, so the standard answer until a few years ago was like, well, we hire editorial assistants, and editorial assistants answer the phones, and maybe write a few emails, but not really do anything else. And it was very sort of hierarchical in that way. And yes, there are still editorial assistant jobs, and Megan is an editorial assistant, but she also is doing like 1,000 other things. She's like, does my social media. She does social media for Marie Claire sometimes. She writes stories. We send her to like, oh my God, we need someone to go cover that. Megan, can you go? So the editorial assistant job has evolved, as all of the editor-in-chief job has evolved as well. But now I'd say we're looking for someone who's really good at video. We're looking for someone who can cover DC politics for us from the point of view of like a 25-year-old woman. So the whole media landscape is completely chaotic right now and fractured, and that can be scary, but I think it's also a huge opportunity. Sort of get in there and see what they need, and you're probably, just being the age that you are, really good at all the stuff we still need.
Do you see your job changing in the near future now that there's more of an importance on, like you said, video, digital?
So my job has completely changed. Not to harp on it too much, but when I first became editor-in-chief of Brides, which was a wild 9 months of my life, I went to go, it was owned by Condé Nast, so I went to my old boss, Graydon, who was still in the building and still editor of Vanity Fair, and I was like, so, what advice can you give for me as a new editor-in-chief? And he was like, you are getting here when the party is over. And I was like, great, well, I didn't really have a choice. I'm here now. And he's like, no, seriously, my job was so much easier, and your job is going to be really hard. And he meant that we have to be on TV, I need help with my social media, I need to do it more. I need to, like when we were at Brides, I was in charge of like our product line at Michael's. I had to do a voiceover being like, the Brides merch is in aisle 7, and I actually had to walk into Michael's when I left to be like, just make sure that thing is not playing. But it's just really, it has completely changed, it will continue to change, and I think there are people for whom that is, it's scary for all of us, but it's also, you just have to find the opportunity in that, and you just have to be really nimble. The only constant is change, and you have to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, brands like Marie Claire aren't just magazines, like that's the most important, but you're expanding to different avenues, different channels and things like that, so it's really interesting to see it change. What non-academic activities do you suggest college students do as they're trying to pursue their career in media?
Again, I think the standard reply is internships. I know that there's sort of ongoing conflicts about internships. We now pay our interns there was a time when we didn't pay interns. I had an unpaid internship. I actually learned a ton from it. It was sort of an old-fashioned apprenticeship back from like the revolutionary times. But I do think internships at the right place can be great. I also just think any life experience, if you can't, if you need to be working in your free time, that's okay too. Work experience is great. Like cocktail waitressing in college was honestly like a huge, I learned a lot. I mean, I basically learned how to deal with like awful drunk men, but but that was really useful for when I got to New York City. And also just to get out of your bubble, to like, so that it was nice to be at Harvard Square and not like, skipping off to class. Or I just think work experience in general is incredibly helpful. And just if you've worked inside any organization, you have a bit more of an idea of what the real world is like. You don't get out thinking like, wow, okay, where's my senior editor job at, it's so, sometimes I often, when I'm interviewing people looking at the resumes, I'm like, so how was lifeguarding when you were 16? Like it's just, you want those jobs, all the things that are not on my bio are probably the more interesting parts. So I don't know if that's helpful, but if you're specifically interested in fashion, there's so many interesting, if low-paying jobs at the entry level. Yeah, or we all, like our interns, none of our interns come in 5 days a week. We know that they are either in school or also working. Or.
I was listening to a podcast that you were on called Girl Boss Radio, and Sophia Amoruso asked you about any advice to get out of that internship or assistant purgatory. So as a senior, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna finish my senior co-op and I'm gonna go into another internship and I'm just gonna be an intern for 10 years. How do I get out of that, or how do I kind of lessen the stress of that?
What did I say in the podcast?
Just be patient.
Well, that is, okay, so one thing I do feel like is the greatest thing about people just getting to college is they're like in such a hurry to go, and that's amazing. No, that's great. And also like this is the generation, like you guys just go start companies, that end up completely changing the world and making billions of dollars. So I'm not worried about any of you because it never occurred to me when I was 23 or 24 that I could just start a company. But I do, and so that's, the patience thing is important, but of course none of you are going to be patient, and it's just forced on you because you don't make it like the day after you've graduated college. So the other thing I would say is like I have two things on the opposite side. One is like I took a couple internships. Technically it was an internship. When I left the Paris Review as a senior editor, making a whopping $18,000 a year, it was a long time ago. I actually think inflation plays a part in there. But I then took an internship at Vanity Fair, even though it was paying better, and it was just I thought it'd be an interesting place. So you really can't be snobby about like doing a couple of entry-level jobs. That's my old school advice, right? There are plenty of people who'd be like, just go start your own company and get funding, and that's maybe a better option as well. It's very risky, and I just didn't ever take that really risky, like, I'm just not gonna make any money for the next week route. But the other thing is, I think once you're in an organization, no matter what it is, you have to keep your ears and eyes open. Like look around for the opportunity. See what people are not doing, or see like, even if it's not posted on the website that we have a job open, if I'm not speaking about Mary Claire, but there's tons to do in an organization that there are always holes to fill. And also just keep your eyes and ears open for job opportunities. I mean, for that first, assistant who quit when I was an intern at Vanity Fair, I got her job because I was the one who filled in for her,
Always raising your hand.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Those are all the questions that I had.
Oh, those are good ones.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
We want to open it up to the floor. If anyone in the audience has a particular question. There's a question in the back.
I'm passing the mic. I'm coming.
Okay, she's coming to you. You stay there. Don't move.
It's been a very athletic afternoon.
Hi, what's a day in your life like?
A day in my life.
Oh, get comfortable.
So there's never a single one that's the same. Again, change is really constant and my schedule is always in flux. But I wake up early with my kids. My husband and I split like who's making lunch for this one, who's getting that one to school. And so getting the kids to school is a huge part of the first hour and a half to 2 hours of my day. Then I hopefully hop on the subway. I try to do a lot that involves my actual brain in the morning, in terms of like reading stories, seeing proofs, like making text decisions. Megan's like, you don't do that. But then I will often have a lunch out. or I'll have people in for meetings. I mean, I definitely think that one of the best things about curiosity and not getting bored is it's really easy to just be at your desk and do the job and sort of, do the required stuff, but it's actually the opportunities that my job provides to go meet interesting people and go to things like this, or just get out in the world. So I try to have lunch with somebody 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes I cancel because there's too much to do with the magazine. And then in the
Cancel
afternoon.
on me today.
I canceled lunch with Andrew. I did. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
But so then in the afternoons, often like with fashion, the fashion world, there are a lot of appointments. You're like going to see DVF presentation, going to see the Michael Kors. There's always another season. It's like there's at least 4, if not 6 seasons. And I've now been in fashion for 5 years. People say, what was your first job in fashion? I said, being editor-in-chief of Marie Claire. But I'm still like, wait, what season? Oh, we got to go see pre-fall? What the hell, what's pre-fall? And so like the next week, there's a whole bunch of appointments, and I try to do those in the afternoon, unless they're downtown, or they're on my way into work, and I try to because the commute from Brooklyn to Columbus Circle is challenging. Although in the morning, that's when I read my information. Like I read Women's Wear Daily, the New York Times, and the New York Post on the subway. I download them before I get on the train. And then I could go out to an event every single night. I don't. I probably would be great for my job if I did, but I have 2 kids and I want to get home to them, and I don't. We have a big staff. There's like a event for an advertiser tonight that I will not be going to because someone else in our staff is going. But I go out like two times a week probably for a work event. We're hosting a dinner on Thursday for Power Women, hosted by an advertiser. There's often, there's certain seasons where there's a lot more to do. And once in a while I have to go to a big black tie event at Cipriani's, which I can't stand. But then I definitely get home by 11 at the very latest. And then on the weekends I really, really just completely unplug and walk around our neighborhood in jeans and deal with the kids. And we made butterbeer yesterday for Harry Potter fans. So I really try to, unplug.
Right here in the front.
Okay. So you said you started writing through newspaper and you saw from your high school and it was your advisor. And when I was in high school, it was my advisor too that inspired me to do your book and write. But how did you find your voice or your tone and what you wanted to write and the content you wanted to produce?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I really ever found my voice as a writer. To be honest, I haven't written that much, except for in high school and college, and a little bit, I did freelance for a year in San Francisco. That's what I was doing in California. And I just wrote whatever anyone needed. I actually wrote customer service emails for The Gap because it was their first season.
Those are so well written.
And everyone reads them. But this was actually the first season of e-commerce. They literally had not planned on people needing to return stuff. It's so foreign right now, but there was no online customer service at The Gap. I also wrote for Wired and Red Herring, so I don't know that. I think practice and the more you write. Andrew, how did you find your voice?
I was going to ask this question. You find people that you like, right? And you discover an author or a journalist whose style you sort of connect with. Just read it, and you sort of glean stuff from it, almost through osmosis. Their voice starts becoming your voice. I'll never bust you for it, trust me. Right? But when you read extensively, in an area that you really enjoy, by an author whose style you like, you start adapting their style. It's like how basketball players walk, right? They saw Michael Jordan walk with his baggy shorts. They sort of picked it up. The way he threw the ball backwards and did his free throws. You pick up things from people who you admire, right? And when you want to write, you have to read, find people you dig, and just read them until you can't read them anymore. Then you move on, and your style becomes sort of an amalgam of the people that you sort of immerse yourself within. You're welcome. Feel free.
I was wondering, with predominantly all fashion magazines being dominated by women, I kind of wanted to know what specifically was a man's role at Marie Claire. If there is.
Ooh, good question. I was thinking the same thing. I didn't want to ask you.
It's really interesting. So first of all, I don't even, yes, our floor is mostly women. We have always had a few men. We definitely, right now, it's not job specific. For a long time, our accessories director was a guy. Our photo director is a guy. I had a creative director who was a guy. I think at Marie Claire specifically, we're even more sort of female focused in that I never we don't really cover men at all in the magazine. Like people are like, oh, let's do like crush of the month. I'm like, nope, they get plenty of coverage everywhere else. I'm only putting women in the magazine. But I always like having some guys on the floor. It's helpful. There was like maybe 2 weeks where we had absolutely no men on the floor, and it was great because we had both bathrooms to ourselves. But anything. I mean, I can't think of a job that a guy couldn't do at Marie Claire. Can you? Editor-in-chief, maybe? Although editor-in-chief, there was the editor-in-chief of Good Housekeeping for years, many years ago, was a man. And Stefano Tonki is the editor of W. W stands for women. I mean, you know, anything.
Good question.
So, what was like the craziest experience that you ever had at your job, and how did you handle it?
Crazy good or crazy bad?
Crazy bad.
Both.
Both. That's both. Yeah, both.
Start with the good.
God. At Marie Claire? It's a really good question. Okay, the craziest experience. I mean, God. It's a really good question. The worst experience is like finding out after the magazine's printed that we've made some horrible mistake and that we need to apologize to someone and that I need to get on the phone and just work the phone and apologize and say we're going to change it online. I think that's sort of the other crazy experience is like just all of the crazy things that happen to you during Fashion Week. I mean, the crazy good maybe is like just getting thrown into a photo op with Donatella Versace and Claudia Schiffer a couple weeks ago, or meeting Mick Jagger. I mean, that's not just meeting people, it's like the really, really cool stories that we get to tell, I guess.
Like being here.
Being here, craziest, best things to ever happen to me. I don't know that I have a great answer for that. I'm going to think about that. Crazy bad is like just chaos, total chaos. Something's late, we're going to get charged, we've lost the trunks, the clothes we borrowed from all those fabulous designers are lost in Thailand and we cannot find them and we have to pay. Something like that. I mean, it's much more crazy good than crazy bad.
I have a quick question.
Oh, hi.
Where's that voice?
Who's speaking?
What is your strategy in making the cover of Marie Claire stand out from others on the newsstand?
Oh, great question. Every month we think about this all the time. If you have any ideas, let me know. But we definitely, I look for we don't always get it. Cover shoots can be complete, shit shows. Like it can be the woman's mad, the clothes didn't arrive, the stylist isn't getting along, she doesn't like her hair. It's like a whole big, and I sometimes get called, like I don't go to that many cover shoots because if they're in New York, I'll stop by, but photographers don't like having the editor-in-chief around because they don't want to be controlled. But I go for really, really striking. I mean, this is one of my favorite covers done in a while. It's like really striking, eye contact, incredibly high contrast, so that you can have a beautiful, dreamy photo that like no one will see on the newsstand. I mean, I also think that the newsstand more and more is more an expression of who we are as a brand, as opposed to the newsstand is, I think, 10% of our readers buy the magazine at the newsstand, 90% subscribe, and then there's a whole other metric for online readership. But so incredibly bold type, and I think Town & Country is really killing it with their cover lines right now, but they're actual like words that they're just really funny and irreverent. It used to be that the Marie Claire reader and a lot of women's magazines always needed to like be reading something about their hair. Hair is like hair sells, like how to get shiny hair, which I will kill myself if we ever put that on the cover again. But it works. It used to work anyway. Now it's like we really actually have more freedom because we can just be who we really want to be and not worry about like being a slave to the newsstand. And also having someone that people want to read about, which you don't always get.
What kind of relationships do the executives have with the assistants and the editors? Or when you get an internship, are they just kind of thrown in and learn from that way, or is there more guidance?
A little of both. I'm going to have Megan answer this one too. But there was a time that like there was just a slew of interns in the closet. They were calling in clothes and they were delivering clothes sometimes, and I never saw them. And we realized that was horrible. So we instituted programs. Most of our interns come in the summer, though we have interns year round, where we had Q&A sessions, and we, every week we had a lunch with a different person from different departments, because I think it's really interesting, even if you're in the fashion closet, just to hear from the photo director or the executive editor or the stories or the creative director. So we made a huge effort. That said, also we have features, like they're features interns, the ones who do the, the features meaning articles that are written about like non-fashion or beauty stuff. So we have a features meeting like once a month, and we try to bring the interns in and have them pitch story ideas and give them feedback. And we've had interns give great story ideas. I'm a huge believer in like the best story, and I got that from George Plimpton, who like would publish a story that came in through the slush pile as much as he would, publish a William Styron story.
Good question. Here, let me.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
I have
Hi.
a question for you of how you want to be remembered as editor-in-chief on Mary Claire. Do you want to leave like a social impact, or how you do on your writing, or on what Claire just said, how you want to make your coverage memorable? Like, how do you want to leave your mark at Mary Claire?
That's a really great question. When I first got there 5 years ago, I really wanted to make it look better. It's just really, and funny because I came through words, but I was like, I just don't think this looks like a magazine. And there was a lot of improvement being done. There was a little period in the 80s where Mary Claire kind of lost its way, and it got really like fluorescent and sex articles, and which are fine, and sex articles are great, but we just wanted to elevate it a little bit. So I really wanted to make it look great. Because someone before me had already gotten the journalism there was a history of good journalism. So we hired a new artistic director, we worked with new photographers, we got a new designer, we did all that, and so I'm proud of that. But there was a little while we just felt like we have to make this into a real magazine. So we did that, and recently it was like, wow, okay, we've done that. Now that we've like established that, what else can we do? And I really would love to make an impact on some of the social justice stuff. I mean, even if it's just influencing a reader in Arizona to run for office, that's huge. And right now we have a huge focus on fashion and sustainability, which I became really interested in after when Trump pulled us out of the Paris Accord, because fashion is actually a huge polluting industry. There's a stat out there that says it's the #2 polluting industry after gas and oil. Someone recently told me they thought it was third after agriculture, which is really interesting, like cow, the whole sort of meat, the production of meat. But I think that's a new conversation. People are really starting, no one ever wanted to talk about it before because it was like too it's just not like the consumer doesn't want to hear about that. And now the consumer really cares. And I think we have the right timing and we have momentum with our partners. And we did a sustainability issue in August, and we're hoping to do a summit on it in the first half of 2018. Yeah.
None like that. Hi. Oh, sorry.
What are some people that inspire you?
Who inspires me right now?
Yeah, and like your life or like career.
God, what a good issue. So my first inspiration was Joan Didion, whose writing I just fell in love with. And there literally is a documentary on Netflix right now, which I just downloaded. It's really great. It's only like an hour long. But also a lot of the women that I worked for, my mom, who I loved very much, and was a great mom, but she was home all the time and she was not pursuing a career. So I really when I got to these offices in New York and looked at these women who were just like 5 and 10 years older than me, they were a huge inspiration, just watching how they did it and figuring out how you could possibly do this. Further afield, I'm really inspired by Michelle Obama. I'm really excited to see what she does in the next chapter. I love Gwen Stefani. I usually fall in love with our cover girls. I'm pretty inspired by Rose McGowan right now. I think that's such an important conversation, and Ashley Judd and the first women who came forward and told their stories. It's hard to do it anyway, now it'd be hard to do it, but to do it, really be one of the first is really, really, really brave and important.
Any other questions? Hi.
Hi, I'm Krista. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
When you're looking for like an assistant or an intern, like what are the top qualities that you look for, or what kind of like stands out to you the most among someone compared to like others?
I mean, someone who's perceptive about the culture and has interesting answers to the offbeat questions, or just like, what did you binge watch this past weekend is a favorite interview question of mine. What's your favorite movie? What do you read? So like a sort of a sense of curiosity, and someone who's of course like interested in words and writing, for me has always been important. And lastly, someone who is smart, but not someone who just feels like they can roll up their sleeves and jump right in and have, do the good and the bad right next to me.
Thank you.
binge watching. Any other questions? I have one last one, but I'm happy to wait. I have nowhere to go. Yes. But you do. You
I'm totally fine. It's so fun.
So, having not been in the fashion industry prior to your position now, how do you think your own style has changed?
Good question. I'm much more aware of it. I like pay attention. I wear things besides black. I just pay attention more to other people's personal style who I think is working. It's something I just wasn't. It wasn't a blind spot for me, but it was like, oh, we have a really great brand new creative director who has been in the fashion world for a long time. Her name's Caitlin Fair, and she's great. She's a very distinct personal style. But she and I have been talking about how we're going to change the magazine under her role, like how she's going to change the way the magazine looks. And she's been teaching me a lot about how it's in the very specifics, you know, like just like the cut, like the hem of the jean or the detail on the sneaker, or the sort of way things are cut or the exact size of the bag, and all of these things. It sounds a little exacting, but it's very interesting. When we're looking at images that I like and don't like, and we're talking about why. It turns out it's like really all in the details. So I pay a little more attention to those. I'd say it's still evolving though.
It's funny, that was actually, you stole my question. Thanks. It was actually a two-part question. That was the first part, but you and I sort of came into fashion the same way. I started working here. I wasn't really thinking much about fashion. Clearly I do now though. But then it became more than just fashion to me. I realized how much bigger it was and what you wear. And I was curious about how your perception of fashion as not just an aesthetic, but as a culture has changed.
I definitely approach it from like an anthropologist point of view, like just what does it all mean? And my first few fashion shows, I was like, wow, this is a whole universe that I didn't even really know existed. I mean, I had heard about it, but like my first fashion shows, I was like, whoa, this is bizarre. So I think that fashion is important in many, many ways. I think it's an incredibly important and meaningful expression of who you feel that you are, because we all know like the days that you feel like you kind of got it wrong, or versus the days where you're like, God, I love this dress. I love how this makes me feel. Also, what it's that it's kind of a code, and that you sort of, there are people like I love the fashion world. I'm still not really of the fashion world. Like I'm not like one of those. There's a whole bunch of people my age who grew up in the fashion world, and they were all interns together here and there, and you can just tell they're the tribe, right? And they go to every single show and every single event, and they'll all be going to Germany in a few weeks to go to the Chanel show, and I'm so happy to have someone else on my staff who does that for me. But there's like a code, like, oh, you've got those sneakers, I see. Like you've got those Vans sneakers, that is a signifier that like, oh, you're connected to that. I remember when my daughter told me she wanted those, I was like, well, you want what? I just didn't know it, but it's a code among her friends, or, and that even like I went to India a long time ago, and we did this really wonderful visit in a village, and we had tea with this family, and the guy who from the hotel, or the little, anyway, he came over and he was explaining to me the caste system in India, which is, we don't have a class system really in the US. I mean, it's certainly up for debate, but it's not like as prescribed as India or even the UK, where it's like, you're this class and that's what you, and he said, well, they're not my caste. I said, how do you know? And he said, oh, I can just tell. What do you mean? Like, he's like, just the way and he explained it was like what they were wearing and how they were this and that, and it was like, God, that's so weird, I could never do that. And then he was like, no, you have the same. You have the same in the US, and I was like, we do? I mean, I can't remember why he knew so much about this, but it was really interesting because I was like, yeah, you kind of do. Like, you sort of know when someone comes in wearing this or that, what it says about them. It doesn't necessarily say their class, but it says like something like, oh, this person's really into music, or that's a business person, or that person's not from New York, or, it is a code. And it's also, it can be armor. Like for working women, I think it's really, can be used to great effect. And I have really, become aware of all of the different meanings of fashion.
Agreed. I think your point about identity is what struck me as most prevalent. This is who somebody is. It's a communication to the world as opposed to just what they put on that day. It's much more powerful than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah. No, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, me too.
Glad we came to it.
Me too. Understand. Good. Anybody else? Yes. Clarissa, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
My question is, what advice would you give to people who love to write but have difficulties staying inspired or have writer's block?
Before I toss this one to Andrew, I will. I mean, I certainly like when I read the whole New York Times on Sunday, or I try to anyway. That's when I get the most inspired. I'm like, oh, I want to write about that. Reading would help. How do you deal with writer's block?
I think that the idea of you want to be there's lots of people who want to be writers. You know, have ambition, they have a facility with words, they have a certain amount of talent that can be developed. If you don't put your ass in a chair almost every day, it's never going to happen. Right? It's like if you want to be in shape. If you want to be in shape, you have to eat right and go to the gym. There's no other way around it. If you want to write, you have to write. And read a lot. Right? Sort of the similar question before. Read what you want to write, how you want to write, but you have to do the writing. I mean, and it's very common. You know, people come to all the time, well, I had this novel in my head, I've been kicking around for years, like, right? You know, if you're writing on a regular basis, you're a writer. Otherwise, you're just thinking about it. You're a dreamer. So write every day. Not ever. Okay, take a day off once in a while, but like write regularly.
I have a friend who's a novelist who said, and I was really discouraged by this at the time, but now I know what she means. She was like, listen, because I was interested in writing and I took some creative nonfiction classes and but I was more of a dabbler. And she was like, listen, if there is anything, she was like, this is not a fun or lucrative or exciting job. She's like, I just have a compulsion to do it. She's like, if there is something else you want to do in the world besides write, and it speaks to you more powerfully enough to like actually you want to try it, she's like, please go do that.
I'll share that conversation with her. It's a great point. I mean, you know when you're a writer because you just can't live without writing. You know, if you can get away and be happy and content without sitting down and writing, then it's not for you. But if you can't, you can't be happy without doing it, then that's your vocation. But you still got to do it. Still have to do it. Sorry, English teacher.
And there's so many great ways to do it now, though. Like you can, start a blog, or you can just write a post every day, or. That's
a good point. Another question I've had for you is like one of the ways we have lots of writers, obviously, amongst our student body. What are the ways as writers that they can sort of find an outlet for publication? We have our own magazine, which is we have copies for you, which is an outlet for them. But is there opportunities for even college students to find blogs, websites? And I know web content is huge. What's the best, most effective way, I should say, for them to find themselves to publication?
Look for mastheads, find the editors, and it's really easy to figure out their email addresses. If you Google the email handle at whatever company, they're going to be there. Or sometimes it's just written at the bottom of their blog, depending on big or small company. So, and just write them a really good idea and get the exciting part about it in the subject line and the first sentence, because they will not read the rest.
So how to pitch, basically.
Yes.
This is how you pitch.
How to pitch.
Websites.
But also, I mean, plenty of people have it's amazing. Like when I was starting out, you had to get someone to agree to publish you, and you showed up with your clip file and you showed like pieces of paper. And now I get interviews from people who've been in their studio apartments writing nonstop for their own blog or for this blog or their friend's blog, and they have so many clips and they just want experience in a company.
Are you impressed by someone's blog posts? If they have a series of blog publications, you find that like a resume item that's impressive?
It totally depends on the quality of the writing, but it's there and it went out into the world and it's writing, and voice really, really matters. And we've just basically getting your writing out there in any way you can. I'm just really impressed and excited about all the ways that you can do it now.
Cool.
I mean, plenty of people have become, I'm trying to think of the Nasty Gal example came up earlier. She wasn't writing, but she just started doing it on eBay. I mean, there's so many different ways to get yourself out there now. It's exciting.
Good.
I'm envious of you guys.
Oh. So am I. So that is going to be our event for the day. I want to please thank Anne Fulenwider for coming by today, spending some time with us.
Thank you so much.
Our first event.
So fun.